Hey, what's going on, everybody? My name is Corey, better known as the Seaman, and I want to welcome you to another edition of the Seaman's Cinema Sit Down and back in for a little more Spooktober action. That's right, we've been catching up today for you guys. It's all been in like a couple hours, but like I did some records this morning, then went to work. Came back, now we're wrapping it all up as we get ready to talk about today's movie. Yes, we caught up with the last couple days, and now we're finally on the day that we should be on. October 26th, as you can see on the calendar in front of you, is in the middle of a week that has been a lot of 90s, early thousands horror flicks. And so far, the first three have all been from the 90s, talking about Scream, I Know What You Did Last Summer, and Jeepers Creepers. But now we kind of transition into the thousands with this movie, although many of its cast members had huge 1999s. We'll get there, but before we can, first you gotta pull up a chair, take a seat. We're getting ready to dive in to Final Destination. I almost forgot to turn the TV on, man. It's one of the many new things I got going for me. But Final Destination is a movie, that is really interesting when you look at it in the realm of the horror genre, right? Like, so many of our movies that we've already watched this Spooktober have been slasher flicks or spinning out of the slasher genre. We've also had a couple monster flicks, but we really haven't had any movies where your main killer is invisible. Well, you can't see him. You don't know where he is. You don't know when he's coming. And that's the thing that's really interesting about Final Destination. Writing and directing here, James Wong, not Wan. James Wong, the producer of The X-Files and American Horror Story. First time in the director's chair after having worked on X-Files for all those years. He writes and directs here with the help of Glenn Morgan on the screenplay. And what Wong crafts is an interesting mixture of things, because I think the cast all do a fine job, but I don't really think there's any real standouts in the cast or in the character stories. But having the movie's killer be Death, trying to get back at people who cheated it, allows for some really, really interesting setups as far as the kills go. I love how Wong creates these like coincidental traps for everyone. And it really kind of turned over to like almost a new subgenre to a degree in the world of horror. When, granted, many of these movies did find ways to have more and more ridiculous deaths, or how, because you're just trying to up the level all the time. But the Final Destination franchise is literally more about, oh my gosh, I can't wait to see how they kill somebody, then, oh man, I can't wait to go see a really good movie. And I'm not saying that Final Destination isn't a good movie. The first one in most of these franchises is usually the most grounded and pretty solid. And the idea, I thought, was really genius. I mean, you have one student, played by Devon Sawa, Alex Browning, who is getting ready to go on a class trip with a bunch of his classmates to France. And he dozes off on the plane before takeoff, has a crazy dream where he experiences firsthand, like inside of the plane exploding. Freaks him out so much that, he like tries to fight to get off, and then they finally escort him along with several of his other classmates off the plane, and one of their teachers, or two of their teachers, off the plane. And, basically says, none of you are getting back on the plane. And one of the teachers kind of fights for the other. You have to let one of us on, so you go, make sure you're with the kids, because they're getting ready to take off for France. And the other kids are all pretty pissed at Alex until the plane explodes. And then from there, it's basically a revenge movie for Death. Like, Death was like, I got this big old plan to kill all these kids in a crazy plane crash. But this group and that one teacher... It's like all kids, one teacher. You dodged it by a sheer chance, encounter or moment, a dream, if you will. So now I'm gonna come back and get all of you. And Wong has to end up creating and crafting these really interesting coincidental deaths. Things that look like pure happen chance, that were total accidents. And like the very first one is pretty intricate. Alex's brother slips on some water that leaked out of the sink and just ran all the way to where it needed to be. After he like dodges a couple, like, oh, I almost stepped. Nope, I'm gonna go over here. And then when he slips in, he knocks down his clothesline. It wraps around his throat and hangs him in the tub. And while some of the deaths can be kind of intricate like that, other deaths, like Amanda Detmer's Terry's, is, she's just like freaking out about the whole situation as the group is kind of having their first conversation about like, no, death is like coming for us. Like, there's a design. Look at what's going on. And she just is like, this is nuts, steps into the freaking road like she's going to turn and walk, and boom, a bus takes her out. And that's my favorite element of this film, and my favorite element, and probably most people's favorite elements of all of the films that followed in the franchise, was how much more intricate or interesting can these accidental, coincidental deaths be. And I won't lie, as those movies have gone on, they've gotten absolutely absurd, but some of them pretty interesting. The first couple Final Destinations, I still enjoy. Where they're not like too crazy. By the time you got to like 4, 5, and maybe the Final Destination, things were getting kind of nuts. But I just love the way that Wong takes this idea of death coming for revenge and gives us these really interesting things that build to a finale that's just massive, right? Like, you've had some of these small and medium deaths, and then you get this really elaborate like plan for death to get Alex and Clear Rivers, who's played by Ali Larter. And those are the things that I think work best for Wong, from the set and production design to the execution, like I said, of these really interesting and sometimes intricate death moments, while giving your cast a mystery, right? Like figuring out what death's design is. That's Alex's whole thing. And he figures out that sometimes he sees things right before they happen, much like Terry's death. And if he can intervene, death will skip that person. But it doesn't stop. It just keeps going and prolongs, death getting to you. And I like that idea for the story. And while I don't think the characters necessarily are super fleshed out, or people that were heavily invested in, other than your main cast, and Steve Stifler, Sean William Scott's in there. I cared about him because of Steve Stifler, but you're still super interested that everything's going on because you can't wait to see what Death is going to try to come up with next. And that's the stuff that works best for Final Destination. Now, as I said, you have a cast that I think does a good job, but they all, pretty much, except for Kerr Smith and Amanda Detmer, had some pretty big 1999s. We just referenced Sean William Scott, who in 1999 was one of the stars of American Pie and really launched his career, and this was the next thing up. And of the deaths, his is like a fast one, but it's one of those, like, all the pieces that get to it happening, you don't see it coming, like, at all. You almost know something's coming, but you don't really know exactly. And then it hits and you're like, oh, damn, I did not see that. I think it's a hubcap just flying off the rails and decapitating Sean William Scott's character. So I like that he was in there, and it would be an absolutely like out of nowhere absurd death for Sean William Scott. But like I said, huge 1999 for that guy. Our lead, Devon Sawa, while he hasn't had that massive of a career, he did break out with Idle Hands in 1999, which is a movie that maybe next year we'll dive into. That one's actually a lot of fun too. But especially for horror fans, even if Idle Hand was a little bit smaller, horror fans certainly knew who Sawa was, and you're like, oh, okay, he's coming back for something else. Let's check that out. But of the three that had pretty big 1999s, Ali Larter had the biggest of all of them. Yes, Sean William Scott's star probably shot the highest, and he got up there as far as fame did faster, but Larter had a massive 1999, starting with Varsity Blues, which, like, for your debut movie, talk about something that's just like everybody, like, from my generation knows who Ali Larter is, man. I mean, that's the girl who wore the whipped cream bikini. And from there, she goes on to co-star in Giving It Up. She's a supporting character in Drive Me Crazy. And then she lands her first big horror role with House on Haunted Hill, another movie that maybe we'll take a look at next year. That movie messes with me some that movie every time I watch it. But I love it. But she was your lead there. So now also another person who had gotten into the horror community that you would have recognized here. And, those three of your three bigs, that kind of had stuff before this, they all do a decent job. Like I said, everybody is pretty good. Sawa, I really enjoy watching him try to figure out Death's design, and when he realizes what's going on, his immediate, I have to go get to that person. And the way that he coincidentally constantly keeps popping up where people die obviously looks real fishy to the FBI. And that stuff kind of all plays into his story. But I think he handles that stuff pretty well. And like I said, that moment toward the end, the final, Death's coming to get you and Allie Larder. And, good old Kerr Smith just nowhere to be seen when this crazy finale's going on. So he can survive. But I like how he plays into that whole scene and what ends up happening. He has a really wonderful hero moment when he pulls the electrical wire off of the car so Allie Larder can get out. And speaking of Allie Larder, she also does a really nice job. I like how she plays in, the fact that Death is really initially coming for her and her dog. Unfortunately, I'm gonna get it all. The dog gets away, don't worry. But I like how she kind of plays into the finale. And that sequence is just one of the more memorable ones because it's so big. And living in that fear when she's trapped in that car that Sawa saves her. You feel those moments, but outside of that, I think Larder just does a rock solid job. She's kind of like the outsider who then gets to be an insider with this group because they're the survivors, and is one of the first to kind of jump on board with Sawa when he starts to figure things out. She has a wonderful moment where they break into the morgue to look at his brother's body to figure out exactly what happened because they didn't buy suicide. And she gets this smile when they drop down. She's like, man, this really, it's really hot, it turns me on type stuff. He's like, this place? She's like, no, doing things that you're not supposed to. And moments like that and her chemistry in general with Sawa, I just think are really solid in the movie. And then when you add in Kerr Smith and Amanda Detmer, they both do fine supporting jobs. Detmer is one of those loose ends you cut pretty quickly after the initial, I think she's the second death after, Sawa's brother dies. But Kerr Smith, one of those people who is just he's like the easy antagonist, right? You don't have a physical enemy or villain or killer coming after you, so you got to have someone that you dislike in the movie besides Death. And Kerr Smith is that guy. He's the D-bag. He's the cool kid. And it's kind of funny. You're going along and he's totally not a character that you really care about. And then he disappears for the finale and you're like, did he get away too? Whatever happened to that guy? And sure enough, he does. They all go back to Paris at the end of the movie. And then you get another one of these really intricate death moments where, they're talking about Death's design and how it skips and Alex is but nobody intervened on my death. The electrical wire just knocked me out of the way of the blast. So maybe it's not over. I don't know why Death took a break for as long as it does, but it comes back and sure enough, it looks like it's going to get Alex. Kerr actually saves him, does something that's redeemable for his character that you don't really like in the movie, and then immediately is ha, see, I told you it wasn't over. I just saved your life. And Alex is and now it skipped me, and the thing that it almost hit him swings back down, nails Kerr, and that's how you end the movie. And it's one of those beats where it's Wong, I really appreciated that moment in the writing where it's this one guy, the one dude you could have taken out right at the beginning of the movie and you would have been fine with. He makes it all the way to the freaking end. You're gonna let him survive with Alex and Clear. I don't understand it. And then to get that satisfying, you're oh, you saved one for me, and I liked it. And like I said, while I don't really have any massive standout performances, the cast is solid, and the story is solid enough, but mostly it creates these moments for Wong to just come up with death sequences that are interesting and fun, and it spawned an entire, like I said, almost subgenre of movies. You don't get to Saw without Final Destination. So for things of that nature, like I've always enjoyed Final Destination, and you got to appreciate it for what it brought to the genre. So there you go, man. Those are all my thoughts on Final Destination. Now I want to know what you're thinking. Where do you land on Final Destination? Is this one of your all-time faves? Is it a cult classic that you just adore, or is it a movie that you respect? That like, yeah, you know what, this movie is pretty solid, and yeah, ridiculous things came, but it gave me something to look forward to. Like, how are we gonna kill this person? Which very much was something, like I said, you saw it in Saw. So do you see how Final Destination could have influenced that stuff? Any of your thoughts, good, bad, indifferent, about Final Destination, down below in the comments section. As always, if you enjoyed this video, please give me a thumbs up. And if you're new, you want to come hang out with C-Man the rest of Spooktober, we're almost to the end. You want to be here for all that action, you haven't yet, jump over there, hit that subscribe button, come join the C-Maniacs, and hit that little bell if you want those alerts. And until next time, for the C-Man's Cinema Sit Down, I'm the C-Man, I'm signing off. Peace. You guys are still here? You must be looking for some more content. Well, don't worry, C-Man's got you covered, man. You got videos like this guy and this guy. And if you haven't yet, and you want to come check out all the C-Man goodies, join the Cinema Sit Down squad, man. Hit that subscribe button. And don't forget to hit the little bell down below that, too, so you can get alerts every time I make new videos.